Escola Peace and Upfield, Judge Peace and Kwasuluman, Kills from Penticton. Okanagan member, Penticton Indian Band member, former chief of the Penticton Indian Band Council, 17 years politics. I'm done. I work for a global company called Sodexo now, and I was invited to come up here and share my story about our journey, and I'd love to share with you guys. So, Lim, thank you.
What was your name? Johnathan. Thank you.
Johnathan Kruger.
Thank you.
Oh, in my introductions, I have family here. My grandmother, Susan Simpson, was a band member here, Ray, and Herbie. And I have other family members here that live in Winfield. I would like to first say I'm really honored and grateful to be here and share our story. Well, my story through PIB and kind of tell you in the beginning kind of story, but I wanted to thank Councillor Ryan for talking about this now. I said I wanted to come and share my story, and I'm going to talk about my family first. My family through the Penticton Indian Band is Kruger family, and family's really tough, really strong, and I love my family, and we're the first ones on the line when it comes to activism, and we're the first ones to fight. I'm proud of that. And growing up, I was taught that taxation was bad, and it wasn't our way. It was the government, all this stuff, but at the same time, my grandpa told me, when you grow up, you're going to learn about the box. And you're going to grow up and you're going to learn about a couple other boxes. Get educated, learn everything inside that box. But remember, that box is not yours, and it's never going to be good enough for your community, your family. And that's the Indian Act. And that's the provincial silos and the federal silos. It's here. And I got into politics, and I didn't believe that there was taxation on our reserve. I was just like, no, there's no tax. There's none. But I found out taxation was being made on our reserve, and I couldn't believe it. And so I had to run and tell my uncles, and I had to go and tell my family. I had to tell our community. We did studies. I'm glad you guys have people here that are crunching these numbers. We did our homework too many years ago, and I even asked what bands were in taxation and what bands were not. I asked what numbers do they have on taxation and what, in comparison. And it was all on development on reserves. And at that time, the Penticton Indian Band, there was $1.6 million in taxation that was being made on the Indian Reserve, our PIB. So the next question I asked, and these guys already presented it, the provincial government was coming on our federal land, our federal Indian Reserve, and putting that tax money in their budgets and putting it in their things, and I was like, what? That's BS. Well, if that tax money is made on our reserve, we should have the right to put it where it should go. So I said, well, where's that tax money going? And it's going to some of it's going to the RCMP, and some of it's going to the fire department. Well, we have fires in our community, and how come you guys have never come out? So we started learning more about it, and I asked, and I did homework on this community. It's been many years, but at that time, I found out that there was $4.3 million being taxed on taxes on this reserve back in those years. And to find out that there's $6 million of taxation money made on this reserve, wow. That's what you call a tax base. And the more development you have on federal Indian reserves, you have a higher tax base, right? And I was like, man, if we get some of our locatees getting in developments and we can create a $10 million tax base, you can use that money to actually pay for your own community centers and things like that. They already said this. And not using our economic development. We were making $8.6 million for our economic development, and that's what paid for the school, and that's what paid for our health building. But if you had a $10 million tax base, you can use that towards that, instead of taking money out of our businesses. So, in our reserve, it's 246,000 acres of reserve land. 4,000 acres of that reserve land is owned by locatee land, band members, CP holders. And the best lands for economic development is the CPs. And that's great. When they created CPs, I'm sure it's up here too, they created CP holders so families can take care of themselves in economic development. And at that time it was ranching and farming. Well, today it's different. It's housing and malls, gas stations, whatever, lots of stuff. It's evolved. That's okay. But there's tax monies attached to that. I love that question you asked about band members, and non-band members coming over, and they do ask that. So starting to say tomorrow, you guys said, oh, 100% yes. The residents are going to be like, whoa, oh my God. I love this part because Chief Clarence Lewis said this is what's going to happen. They're going to come up and say, well, if we're paying taxes, we expect this, we expect that. And PIB strategically, just like this team said, we can set the rate. PIB strategically set the rate where we were like 2% lower. Cheaper, just a little bit cheaper. And those people came, and we held a town gathering in West Bench School, and it was a packed house. I loved it. And they said, well, what are you going to do for us? And I said, absolutely the same thing you're getting right now. And if you don't like it, you can pick your house up and you can move it over there and pay the same taxes over there. Except over here, you're paying 2% lower. Man, they just were so happy just by 2%. And guess what? I think 2 years later, we put it right back up at the going rate. And it was so good because, we have $1.6 million. I think today it's around 2.3. There's some developments that are happening. I think, like Nissan, we have a Nissan development on the River Channel land there. We were supposed to do some more developments there, but things happened, but it's going to get back on track. We want all those locatees to develop a whole bunch of land there. We want them to have great deals for their leases, and the band wants to collect the taxes off of that. Nissan last year, this year, they pay $40,000 a year on commercial. That's a tax every year. So if there's 300 acres over there, and you can, in each development is around 2 acres of land, so that's 150 developments they can do along the river channel. You can just average that by 150 times 40,000. That's what you could potentially make every year. And that's why we wanted to build all that stuff. That's why we wanted to build all that infrastructure. If you build infrastructure, you help locatees build infrastructure, you get the tax money, the locatees get their leases, and it's huge. West Bank First Nation, they were working on a model of collecting, adding up all the taxes that are made on their 4,000 acres of reserve land. And with all the income tax, everything that's made on their reserve, they're telling me that it's over 200 million a year. And they're only getting $18 million out of that every year because of their self-government agreement. I'm sorry I'm jumping from that to this, but it's all tax money that's being made. That's being made every year. That's not economic development, that's just the tax base. So, getting back to the simplicity of just the land tax here, because there's other taxes you can do. The Penticton band is never got to the next level on the GST part. We just stayed strictly to the land tax. So we're getting about $2.3 million every year, and with that we're topping up some of the programs, and because we're the tax authority. Here's a story. There's a certain amount of money that goes to the police, a certain amount of money goes to the fire department. There's this money that was going to the library. You have to pay a library fee of this taxation. And we felt it was too high. So we asked questions saying, well, how many people are actually using the library? And just as we thought, not even a quarter of the taxpayers were using it, because everybody uses the internet. So why should we pay that much? So we said, no, we're going to only give you this much. And they try to shame us in the media, and we just said, no, we're the tax authority, this is what we're going to do. If any of our taxpayers want to go and use the library, they can come to our taxation department and get a coupon, and they can go there and pay as they go. That saved like $76,000. So, I mean, your team, you can create your own team to make those kind of decisions, and you can steer that $6 million that your guys are getting every year to going towards your interests. Because I can tell you right now, the regional district is getting your money. They're getting that tax money that's made on this reserve last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And if you don't do anything by next year, they're going to take your $6 million and put it to wherever they want. You guys, the Okanagan Indian Band, the Penticton Indian Band, we can govern this. So it can be done. It has nothing to do with our title rights. It has nothing to do with any of those things that was already presented. So yeah, I really hope you guys control your the tax money that's made on your reserve. Thank you.
Okay, and I also have a question for Johnathan. How do you assess the tax for each renter? Like, is it per person or per lot size, or?
It's per unit. So if it's a housing unit, there's a certain rate, and if it's a commercial, it's higher.
So it doesn't matter what size lot. Like if somebody has 2 lots.
Yeah, if it's a residential, it's a certain rate under the Leasee assessment.
But you're not hearing me. If it's two lots,
yep.
They get charged for 2 lots, or do they just get 1?
So if it's for the 1 unit they're renting, then they get charged taxes for that.
Okay, they're renting 2 lots, but they're only building 1 house.
So Deb, it's actually based on the assessed value of the property. So the assessor would come in,
yes,
and we would assess the dwelling as well as the improvements.
Okay, do you have to like survey each lot?
Well, it's already all been surveyed by
No,
us.
they haven't. My great big lot is surveyed, but all of the little housing lots are not.
So
Bucksy and registered, they're talking Bucksy.
We're talking Bucksy leases, because that's what you're already taxing the registered leases.
I got
We're
it.
talking about Bucksy leases, correct?
We're
That's
talking
our
both,
problem,
actually,
yeah.
yeah, we're talking both, and so what you would be doing is looking at the dwelling. So the way that you would be doing an assessment is that you'd go by and they wouldn't really look at the lot lines per se, they would look at each cabin or each dwelling and say, this is worth this much, say it's $200,000, and then you would take that rate that Johnathan was referring to and you would apply it to that residential
So
property.
someone would actually have to come out and survey the lot size. to
Correct.
say this is what it-
Not the
what it's
lot
worth.
side, it's more the dwelling, so you're
Yeah.
getting taxed on the dwelling.
I have another question for Johnathan. What were the drawbacks?
There's,
Implementing taxation.
you're right, there's a little bit of drawbacks, but guess what? Those fears of other renters, they get replaced really quick. And other people will come in and say, you know what, oh, we'll come in there, we'll live there, we'll pay the taxes, we don't have a problem, we'll pay your rent. And it's,
I just wanna know what were the drawbacks that Penticton Indian Band went through and on their steps to taxation.
so what we did is, as soon as we agreed to it, we let everybody know, even the locatees, even the people that were leasing on Buckshire leases. And everybody has to pay. And so if those taxes have to be paid, they have to be paid. So and some people run around and they get worried, but at the end of the day, they know they have to pay taxes. So, but instead of paying it to the regional district, they're paying it to us, the First Nations, or whoever the tax authority is gonna be.
So over the years, I'm a grandma now, over the years, as a young person, talking with our fluent elders who are gone now, they were against taxation. And they said it was another step towards our extinguishment as the scale. So my question is, to any scale here, what are your thoughts on that? How is this going to guarantee our existence for our grandchildren, their grandchildren, our little Indian reservation here? Like, how is this going to help us in that sense? Yes, the dollars sound good. Oh, we can have a gym, we can have this, we can have that. But what will it cost us on the other hand?
Thank you for asking me a question about my thoughts on is this going to change? The absolutely thing, absolutely no, it doesn't change anything. I'm going to tell you something. We are in an Indian Act system now, whether we like it or not. It's going to be like that next year, in 5 years, 10 years, just like it was the last 30 years. It's just the way it is. But we're making do with this crap system. I'm sorry I have to say it. It is what it is. The reality of the situation today that you're facing, that we faced in the past, for a PIB, we had the same comments and questions. The reality is taxation is being made on this reserve this fiscal year. It's up to you to acknowledge that. $6 million is, sorry, I yell. I talk too loud, I guess. When you understand that you have an opportunity to direct that $6 million that is being made on your reserve, like next year, say, you can direct some of those funds to top up some of your programs that you deserve. Right now, $6 million of that tax money is going to the regional district, and they're making that decision on that $6 million on your behalf. That's it, that's the bottom line. And if you want to stay like that for the next 10 years, that's your decision. And I think anybody can respect that, but as long as people know you're allowing that to happen, you're allowing a provincial entity to come on your federal INAC reserve and do that, then it's your guys' protocol. PIB said that's not acceptable anymore. We're going to direct that. And it's gotten a little bit better, and it's still not enough, but it's at least we're in control of it. You guys have the opportunity to do that. And this is a governance issue, and this will come back if it gets voted down again, or what, you know, I'm here for free. I come up here because I care about you guys, and I want to help. And I want you guys to make decisions on $6 million on top of the budget you guys already have. Make a stronger fire department. You can put some of that money towards something to top things up. I'm sure your fire department needs that. You can put better, we need 10 more streetlights out here. You guys have money in the budget to put 10 more streetlights. There's gonna be, your tax team is gonna come up and talk to you guys and say, what else do we need? The budget's not gonna be very big, but this is what we got. So that's just, as long as you acknowledge that, that's all I have to say. So it doesn't affect any of the rights. We're still doing title cases, we're still doing specific claims, we're still doing everything else. It's just the people that are paying taxes on reserves, we're just the tax authority over that now. And direct it where it goes, where we want it.
There's lots of talk on individual concerns about their lands, their leases, Buckshee or whatever. But I think it was in the chat, and I'm more concerned about our title and rights. And so, what impact is there for title and rights with the implementation of taxation?
Thank you, Peggy. Those are really good comments. The comment that you're absolutely right. There's social problems in our community still. We're doing economic development. We're doing well, better than we were 20 years ago, but there's still problems. You're right. But it's better than it was 20 years ago as well. Those problems will always happen in our communities with our families. And it's tough. But I have to say that it did not affect the Penticton Indian man and title rights whatsoever. I can tell you, everybody in this room, including you, Peggy, that it didn't affect nothing about our title rights. We're still as strong as ever. And we did not sell out. We just didn't allow the provincial government, the provincial entity, to come onto our reserve and take $1.7 million. And we did sit down with our locatees and we worked together with them to ensure that everybody, it takes time, it takes trust, and we worked with them, and we can help generate putting water lines towards their developments and encourage more developments and better developments. And if they prosper, we prosper. So, and the other thing that we said when we started our process, because I hear a lot of CPs talking tonight, and I've seen it in our community. When reserves were first established, and somebody brought that up with the INAC and the Indian Act and all that, reserves were created for the use and benefit for band members first, not CPs and not the residents that are coming in here living on their lands. So that was the approach that we took with PIB, because if you took away the band members and added out how many people live on our reserve, there was a lot of other people on our reserve. And our band members felt that they had to pay, and they had to pay the Penticton Indian band. And we came up with creative ways, and it took some time, but it ended up being really much better and safer, and it's not going to check a box and say you're healed. It's always constant hard work. So it doesn't affect your title rights. I don't need Russ Diablo to tell me that, because I'm living it. And our our community is doing better. We get 1.6 million, 2.3 now, but when we first got our 1.6 million, after we pay, you pay the fire protection, police and all that stuff, we only had $90,000 at the end of the day to direct some of the extra money. OKIP is in a way bigger position than the PIB is, and I would love to have $6 million in tax base in our community, but we don't. You guys are in a way better position than us, and I don't know after the cost breakdown what your budget's going to be, but you can't talk about money that you don't have right now that where you can direct it unless you put it in, until you fight for it and get it and put it in front of your table and say, okay, we got this budget now we're going to put it towards this and that. Right now, I just did a rough calculation of just even the bare minimum, not even touching the low KT lands, of 3.5 million. I just times that by 10 years, that's 35 million. In the last 10 years, the regional district came out here and put that money, took that money from your reserve. I don't think that's right, but that's when we learned that in Penticton, we're like, no way, we're not going to allow that anymore. We're not going to allow a provincial government to come on our federal union reserve and direct the money where they want to put it, and we stopped it. And we didn't sell out, so I don't think that's a sellout thing. We just took our rights as a government to exercise that, and we did it.
I just have one question to ask, and I've asked this question since I sat around the table a few years ago. Is this taxation part of the land use, is it part of the land use program? Because when I first heard of the land use program, it was Manny Jules was heading it. So I want to know if this taxation part, is it part of the land use program?
Yeah, so Diane, do you mean the land code program or just land use?
I can't hear you.
Do you mean the land code? Is that what you're
No, it's called the land use program.
It's not part of that, no. They're two absolutely separate things.
Do you know what the land use program is?
Are we referring to Shelton's comment about what
No,
Manny Jules was
I
into?
couldn't even hear him.
Okay.
And my comment too is, Sheldon, you should have been here listening to us. Yeah, but
If you
I'd
can
like to
explain
know.
what it is, then maybe we can let you
I'd
know.
like to know for sure, because when I first heard of Manny Jules, he was pushing this land use program. And I just want to know if this taxation is part of that program, coming in a different door.
To answer your question for PIB, I don't know anything of what you're talking about with the land use thing. There was nothing presented to us when we got into taxation, so I've never heard that in my life, so I don't know anything about that. So I don't see how you guys know anything. I know people are talking about land codes, but that's another issue.
See, those are some of the issues that I'm concerned about, because once we start talking about taxation, we're talking about land and what the legal definitions, how the legal definitions are going to impact us, not just today, but in the future. And I heard you say to, I'm not sure who was speaking, that even the Buckshee, if the ban was to go to taxation, the Buckshee leases are just automatically a part and parcel of the taxation bylaw.
Yeah, it's not automatic. We would have to include that within the tax bylaw, and so yeah. But I mean, it's clear in legal precedent that there absolutely can be provincial taxes applied to Buckshee leases. The reason why they're not happening right now is because nobody knows about them in a sense. Like the assessor doesn't actually know what the
But a lot of
condition
people,
of
but a
it.
lot of, we know band members out here is that people leasing their land and they are Buckshee leases.
So it does happen, yeah.
They are paying tax, they're being taxed.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just cede the floor to Jonathan. He's gonna try and answer your question a little better than me.
I'm not gonna answer the question, but I'm gonna tell you a story because it's relevant to what they're talking about. One of the locality landowners at Red Wing, when you come into Penticton, at Red Wing Resort, as soon as you come in, that's a locality landowner, and that's a Buckshee lease. And that lease just came out recently. Now my great uncle Leonard owned that land and passed away, and then there's a will thing that's going on. And everybody was worried about that because the will wasn't settled and the lease was coming up. And it was a Buckshee lease though for like 30 years. And even though the family is getting the money for they negotiated and they got another lease again, which is good for the family, right? And it's good for the band too, because they renegotiated and they went for like another 30 years, I think. The band still collects the taxes off of that locality's land. So all those residents still pay the Penticton Indian band, and Carlene, like pays Carlene, goes up and pays, and then we pay a fee. And we, like with the city, and they go and they pick up the garbage and they do all the other stuff. So there's snow removal. That might be part of the strategy, but there is some things that we kick back in, and we work with the localities that way. But the lands never come back. And the other thing that we did with the band when we did Ska Hills, that's a 150-year lease for tax purposes, and we got a lump sum of money. We're a partnership. We're a partner in that project, and we're charging $4,000. I think $4,000 per unit that every resident has to pay. And there's going to be, at the end of the day, there's going to be 650 units because that's what the referendum was for 650 units. So right now we're just close to 300. So probably within the next 10 years, we'll have 650 units, and then it just times up at 4,000. So that's what that development will be getting every year. So, but we don't lose the land to BC, or we don't lose any of that. It's just a term, and then when it comes back up, they'll probably re-lease it. So right now, Ska Hills has been operating for about since 2011. So what years is it now? 10 years. 11 years. So 10 years. Let's say 10 years now. And we've already seen people flip their homes. They doubled the value of their homes, but they're buying that lease not at 150 years. Now it's 140 years. So they know, the buyers know what they're buying. So some people buy a house or a lease, they take over that lease, and even if it's 50 years left on the lease, they'll still buy it.
So I think what my question is when I'm listening to you talk tonight, is there a template or something where you're just gonna come in here and then fill it in and say, okay, we're gonna tax the registered leases, we're gonna tax the Buckshee leases, and it's all already written, and we basically sign the document? Or is there any flexibility for the people to have a say about whether or not they want Buckshee leases in that bylaw or not? That's my primary question.
So again, in our story, when we moved forward in taxation, and we worked with the localities, and it was a community decision, and we talked about it, and they said, go for it, let's get it done. We got it done. And so the question, again, I said earlier, so when reserves were established, they were established for band members. So anybody that wants to live on the reserve, they have to pay a fee, and it's like a taxation, right? So And I have to tell this story too right now, because right now we have like 3 Crees living up in Scholar Hills. They're not band members, even though their status. They're not a Penticton band member 5, 9, and 7, so they reserves are rated for that number, not other numbers, so they have to pay taxes as well. So you'll learn that in taxation as well. So I forgot the first question you're asking me about.
Yeah, so that's what I'm asking is there a pre-written
Oh, yeah, yes.
or do we have say in what's going to be did or
So-
is that taxation?
So the short answer is yes. So residential, if it's a lower income residential, it gets assessed like a BC assessment office. They assess it, so if it's a modular home or a trailer, it's valued this much. If it's a nice housing development, it's valued this much. If it's a commercial development, it's this much.
But what I'm saying is if we don't want to tax Buckshee leases, is that an option for us to say, no, we're not going to tax? Because I heard Michael say earlier, and it was my understanding, and that's why I wanted clarification. From what I heard him say was that irregardless, Buckshee leases are going to be taxed. That's what I want to know.
So again, in our community, before we were in taxation, some of the residents were getting, on Buckshee leases, were getting taxed.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, can we as the people
Yeah.
make the decision? Who is gonna be the one sitting down, writing everything up? Is it gonna be Michael and some of the band managers and a few of the chief of council and maybe some legal advisors going to the one sitting there and filling it all in and then bringing it to us and asking us to endorse it if it was to be passed or even to be brought up prior or will we have a say in what's in there?
Yeah, so I guess, that is a question for your chief of council. So they're the ones who can bind the community, and it's kind of the question that was asked in the chat. Like, who makes this decision? Like, there's no legal requirement for a vote. In fact, no other First Nation who's ever gone down taxation, so the other 170 some bands, no one's ever voted on this before. It's just chief and council makes the decision. Your council said, we're gonna actually ask the membership what they think, right? So the answer is, we could make an exemption in our law, taxation law, if the community and council says, yeah, let's do this, to exempt Buckshee leases. That is a possibility. It's not what we've been kind of talking about or looking into, because there's a lot of issues with that. It creates kind of an uneven playing field for those who decided to go down the registered lease path are now being penalized in a sense, from those who decide to stay with Buckshee. Oh, and yeah, so, sorry, Dave.
No, please.
Johnathan probably needs to be moved on as well, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna head out soon too, and I come up here on my own time, no gas money. I do this because I care. I went through this process that you guys are going through, and I changed my mind. I supported taxation, and it's been very great. And I have to say that we worked with our locatees, our CP holders. We're still working with them. I can tell you that we've invested $8 million with CP holders. We're hoping that they can build 150 developments. And, I'm gonna get 2 more eats now. But, I don't want to dangle no carrots in front of you. But what I learned, and I'm always intrigued and I always want to study, and it's good to ask other nations. Right now, quick and short, this is the reality. You guys are, the Okanagan Indian Band has potentially $6 million with taxation dollars that are coming into your community every year. Just times that by 10. That's how much you guys are missing out on. It's just a reality. If you don't even talk about the Lokedi lands and it's just the 3.5 million, just go back 10 years. That's $35 million that you guys didn't put in your infrastructure and your services. That's all it is. It's just infrastructure and services. Thank you.